Wednesday is, in the parlance of the Christian liturgical year, Ash Wednesday. It is the designated start of Lent. The day sacred to Christians derives its name from the practice of placing ashes on the foreheads of adherents as a celebration and a reminder of our human mortality, as a sign of mourning the mistakes we've made along life's journey, and symbolic of a turn back toward a healthy relationship with God. The ashes that are used are typically gathered from the burning of the palms from the previous year's Palm Sunday, another celebration marking sacred moments in the Christian tradition. Ancient is the warning of the church. So ancient that we evolved moderns, we who are so in tune to the ways of the world, we who are so sure of our future, have become embarrassed to embrace its significance. Memento. Remember. My predecessors have intoned for centuries now. Remember, thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return. That sounds old in our contemporary ears, doesn't it? Archaic. Perhaps even irrelevant. Why should I think about death when the world cries life and live it up? Why should I think about death when the public relations priests of this age expound on the marvels of youthful abs and reveal the mysteries of aging from their digitally enhanced infomercial pulpits? The delay of the inevitable as we progress on our journey is being mapped out as the genetic cartographers splice together the latest Lego sheep. It verges on annoying to have the rushing stream of my life and the enjoyment of my dark roast cup of coffee interrupted by the morbid prophecy that both will one day dry up. Don't bother me with what will be. Because you see, I don't even have time for what is. Ancient also is this season of Lent when the Christian is encouraged to think of one's death and the sin that caused it. We are encouraged to examine ourselves so deeply that the knowledge becomes confession, and confession becomes the resurrection of the soul. This marking of the Christian calendar that is celebrated both midweek and mid-year developed as a day of penitence to delineate the beginning of Lent. Lent being the 40 days of preparation interspersed with 6 Sundays preceding the celebration of Easter. Ash Wednesday, the start of the Lenten period, is a particular time for new beginnings in the faith, a time for returning to God's grace that many of us have turned away from. We are implored to recall our mortality and seek the presence of the Holy Spirit to renew us. In this room, at this moment, is, as the ancient fathers of Celtic Christianity spoke of, one of the thin places where we can touch eternity. This is a sacred place where the separation between this world and the heavenly realm is thinly veiled. A sacred spot where, like Jacob, we can wrestle with God. And though often wounded in the encounter, we can limp away blessed with a new strength because we have experienced God face to face. Ancient is the experience of the presence of God. And we, like Jacob and so many who have journeyed before us, are wrestling with our understanding of who God is. We are seeking a way to return home. We are looking for life while in the midst of contemplating our own death. As we are reminded from the ritual service of death and resurrection, in the midst of life, we are in death. From whom can we seek help? Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. I think we need the thin places in which to encounter the holy. So, perhaps it is to the ancients we can look for help in discovering how to pierce that veil, how to wrestle with God in order to find strength for the present and hope for the future. Esther DeWall, in her book, The Celtic Way of Prayer, examines the poetry and the prayers of Celtic Christianity, offering us a guide to encountering spiritual thin places, regardless of where we might be physically. One prayer she discusses is the 7th stanza of an Irish hymn called the Lorica of St. Patrick. It goes like this. Christ beside me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ within me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ to the right of me, Christ to the left of me, Christ in my lying, in my sitting, my rising, Christ in heart of all who know me, Christ on tongue of all who meet me, Christ in eye of all who see me, Christ in ear of all who hear me. DeWall writes, it's only too easy to read the 7th stanza quickly or to pray it casually, with the result that its full significance can become dulled through overfamiliarity. I need to take it, phrase by phrase, slowly and contemplatively, entering imaginatively into what it is giving and what it is asking. This stanza makes the indwelling of God a reality for me, but it becomes a felt reality only as I envisage what they are saying. I have to think of myself as a space, a sacred space in which God dwells. That's what the ancient Celtic Christians were also saying. There is a need to take the time to be with God. There is a need to ingest the presence through all the senses. There is a need to provide the sacred space of ourself for the Holy One to dwell in. In the 1100s, Hildegard of Bingen defined prayer as breathing in and breathing out the breath of the universe. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Zen Buddhist monk, suggests that your body is your first home. Breathing in, I arrive in my body. Breathing out, I am home. While Mark Nepo, in his book 7,000 Ways to Listen, elucidates, all the traditions suggest that breathing the one breath is our deepest home. We each have at least 2 moments of such completeness: during our first breath at birth and in our last breath at death. How often we stumble into this completeness of being during our time on earth depends on our journey and our willingness to enter it. Today, now in this thin place, You are invited to take time to ingest God, to breathe in and out, and stumble into completeness. As I again read the words of the Lorica slowly, I invite you to contemplate what it means to experience an immersion in the sacred, what it means to be fully encompassed by the holy, what it means to remember, memento. If it's comfortable for you, I invite you to close your eyes and listen. Christ beside me, Christ before me. Christ beneath me, Christ within me. Christ behind me, Christ above me. Christ to the right of me, Christ to the left of me. Christ in my lying, my sitting, my rising. Christ in heart of all who know me. Christ on tongue of all who meet me. Christ in eye of all who see me. Christ in ear of all who hear me. Ancient is the warning of the church. And yet, it can be as fresh now as when it was first uttered. Memento. Remember. We will return to that which we have come from. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And yet it's not death that we approach when we invite God to breathe into our souls, but more accurately, life to which we are returning. It is a new life, which is infused with the presence of the Sacred One. Just a thought.